by just turning it?
Yeah, maybe.
Live.
Live? Oh, we better go. Live. Live is live.
See?
Yeah. We are live. Okay. Today we are on page 184. We're going to talk about. I'm going to take my phone. It doesn't disturb me. Thank you. So today we're going to talk in Parshas Vayeshev, the story that starts with the two dreams. Yosef is thrown into prison, sold to slavery by his brothers, and Parsha describes what's taking place. And then it says that when he finds himself in prison, he sees the butler and the baker, the presenter of the wine, Sarah Mashkim, that they are also both in prison. The Torah describes as follows: that the cupbearer of the king of Egypt, one who would give him his wine, and the baker, they had both sinned against their master, against the king of Egypt. And Paro became, this is in Bereshis chapter 40, and Paro became very angry at his two attendants, at the chief cupbearer and at the chief baker, and he placed them in the prison, in that same prison that Yosef was imprisoned. And the chief of the prison had appointed Yosef to be with them, and he served them, and they were for a year in the same prison. Now both of them dreamed a dream, on page 186, both of them dreamed a dream, each one his dream on the same night, each man according to the interpretation of his dream. So both the cupbearer, the Sarah Mashkim, the one in charge of the wines, and the baker, both quite well-placed attendants of the king of Egypt, were both locked up in prison. Yosef came to them in the morning after they had had this dream, and he saw, and behold, they were troubled. So he asked these two people, "Why are your faces sad today?" And they said to him, "We dreamed a dream and we don't know what the answer to the dream is. What is the dream telling us?" So Yosef said to them, and here's a very important sentence he tells them: "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell them to me now." In other words, if God wishes, then perhaps I'll be able to tell you what the dreams mean. So the chief cupbearer related his dream to Yosef, and he said to him, "In my dream, behold, a grapevine is before me. And on the vine, there are 3 tendrils, and it seems to be blossoming, and its buds came out, then its clusters ripened into grapes." So he sees the growth of clusters of grapes. "And Paro's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Paro's cup, and I placed the cup on Paro's palm." And Yosef said to him, "Oh, this is its meaning. The 3 tendrils are 3 days. In another 3 days, Paro will call you amongst the other officers, and he will restore you to your position, and you will place Paro's cup into his hand, according to your previous custom when you were his cupbearer. But," Yosef says, "remember me when things go well with you, and please do me a favor and mention me to Pharaoh, and you will get me out of this house. For I was stolen from the land of the Hebrews, and here too I've done nothing for which they have put me into the dungeon." Now, the chief baker saw that Yosef had interpreted the dream so well that he said to Yosef, "Me too." He says, "I also had a dream. One second, maybe you can help me out with my dream." He says, "In my dream, behold, there were 3 baskets on my head. And in the topmost basket were all kinds of Pharaoh's food, the work of a baker. And the birds were eating them from the basket atop my head." And Yosef replied and said, "This is its meaning. The 3 baskets represent 3 days, same as the 3 branches represented 3 days. In another 3 days, Paro will remove your head from you and hang you on a gallows, and the birds will eat your flesh off you." And that was symbolized by the birds eating the bread from his head in the dream. Now it came about on the 3rd day, Paro's birthday, that Paro made a feast for all his servants, and he counted the chief cupbearer and the chief baker among his servants. And he restored the chief cupbearer to his position as cupbearer, and he placed the cup on Paro's palm, and the chief baker he hanged, as Yosef had interpreted to them. But the chief cupbearer did not remember Yosef, and he forgot him. So Yosef remains another 2 years in prison. But we want to talk about the dream aspect. And we would like to understand, why is it that Yosef saw in the dream of the Sar HaMashkim, of the butler, the cupbearer, that in 3 days he's going to be restored to his position? And what made him see in the dream of the baker that in another 3 days he's going to be killed and the birds will be eating his flesh off him? Because, let's be quite honest, you could have said, if you didn't know what the interpretation was, you could say that also. The fact that the baker had a dream that 3 days later, that there's 3 baskets and the birds are eating, maybe the birds are symbolic of Paro. And the way they used to serve things in those days, they would carry things on their heads sometimes. So maybe it could have been interpreted, in 3 days, you're going to be carrying a big, nice, beautiful breakfast basket of fresh buns and cinnamon danishes, and Paro will be taking it off the basket off your head. That would have been a beautiful interpretation. Yosef didn't interpret it that way. So, what did he see in the dream? That the mashkim, the cupbearer, the one in charge of the drinks, would be restored to his former position, yet the baker would be doomed to death. Now, lest you say, well, what's the difference what Yosef said? Whatever God had in store from them, that's really what would take place. So we want to interject here and put, but the Gemara tells us something interesting about dreams, and it may actually give us some practical advice as well. The Gemara says in the Masechta of Broches, which I tractate of Broches 55b, he says as follows: when Shmuel would have a bad dream, he would say, citing the verse that says, dreams speak falsely, and therefore I have nothing to worry about if I had a bad dream. When he would have a good dream, he would ask this as a rhetorical question: do dreams speak falsely? But there's another verse that says about prophets, I will speak to him in a dream. In other words, sometimes God gives us messages in a dream. So if you had a bad dream, he would say, oh, dreams are false. If you had a good dream, he would say, are dreams really false? God says he sometimes speaks to people through dreams. Now, what's the difference what he said? If the dream, isn't the dream telling you, if it's meaningful, so isn't the dream a reality? What's the difference what you think about it? So now let's hear and understand that the Gemara very much says it depends what you make of it. It depends how you interpret it. Rabbi Bizna Bar Zavda said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, who said in the name of Rabbi Pando, who said in the name of Rabbi Nachum, who said in the name of Birim, Rabbi Birim, who said in the name of another elder called Rabbi Bana. There were 24 dream interpreters in Jerusalem. I once had a dream and went to see all of them. Each one gave me a different interpretation. And every interpretation was fulfilled. This fulfills what it says that all dreams follow the interpretation. For Rabbi Elazar said, how do we know that all dreams follow their interpretation? The verse states, and it came to pass just as he had interpreted for us. So in other words, we have a very important lesson here, that the way you interpret a dream can actually affect the outcome. However, there's a qualification here. Rava says this applies only when the interpretation matches the dream. As it says, he interpreted according to his dream. He has to actually interpret according to him. So let's just, the topic of dreams is a very big topic. Books have been written about it. We're not going to, in a few minutes, cover the topic, but let's give a general Jewish Torah perspective on dreams. Is that there are various kinds of dreams. Some dreams are what you thought about during the day. Therefore, you thought about it during the day, you may dream about it by night. It's your thoughts that have been processed during the day. Other times, there can be hidden messages in a dream, but that very much depends how you will read into those messages. That which can actually affect, we know that our The way we project actually affects outcomes. So, on a very simple psychological level, we could say, if you got your dream interpreted that something bad is about to happen, you may actually subconsciously be setting yourself up to behave in a way that something bad may happen. It may be that you'll be more careless. Could be a person will think something bad is about to happen, and he'll be more careless in certain things which actually allow something bad to happen. Whereas if you feel something good is going to happen, that may project an atmosphere, an aura of success, and he may go in with more confidence, and may go and achieve that which he is dreaming about. So interpretation of the dream is important. Recently somebody called me, an older gentleman called me with a dream, which could have been frightening. But I told him, well, that's not frightening at all. It was something related to some kind of a destruction. I told him, well, that's good dream, because actually we're planning to build. In order to build, there's a certain amount of knocking down. So destruction, if it's a preparation to building, it's demolition, it's not destruction. It's paving the way for something greater. So I told him, that's a great dream. And he was so relieved, because he was worried he had a dream and maybe it had negative connotation. But truthfully, the way it looks to me, the interpretation of building something new and grand and so on really fit his dream in the details that he told me. But it's important, you get up in the morning, if you had a dream you don't like, first of all realize, don't get nervous. Dreams are not, if you're not a prophet, dreams are false. But if it's still bothering you, there's always different ways of seeing the dream, of seeing it in a positive light. It's important to paraphrase it and to position it, to project it in a positive, from a positive perspective. Now, that's all speaking about regular dreams and going just to wise people who can interpret dreams. Here though, remember the verse I pointed out. Yosef said when they told him they had a dream, he didn't say, oh, I'm a great psychologist and psychoanalyst and I can tell you what the dream is going to mean based on what you're... He said, Halo lelokim patronim. God is the one who has the answers to dreams. Why don't you go ahead and tell me? In other words, if God wishes and gives me insight, I will be able to tell you what the message of the dream is. And the Abarbanel, which we're going to quote now, says just that. Yosef replied, don't interpretations belong to God? In other words, don't think that your dreams can be fully interpreted with human effort and wisdom. For one detail of a dream can allude to many different interpretations. Therefore, it is almost impossible to interpret dreams without mixing some false details into the interpretations. For interpretations belong to God. In other words, it is only possible to fully interpret a dream by divine inspiration that can reveal what is hidden. If you really want to know what the dream is telling you, there needs to be divine inspiration. You can't go just to regular people. Yes, you come to me with a dream, I can tell you maybe a way to put a nice, maybe if God grants me the insight, put a nice, to see it in a good way. But I can't tell you what Hashem is trying to tell you in the dream. Yosef was endowed with godly wisdom, and he was telling them, if God wants, the answer to the dream is with God. But tell it to me, and perhaps, let me see what God, perhaps God will give me the insight and the wisdom what to tell you. So, the question is like this. What did the interpretation really had to be based on the outcome that God had intended in this case? Now, the verse says like this: each man according to the interpretation of his dream, each one dreamed a dream similar to the interpretation destined to befall them. In other words, what Rashi is telling us is that the dream fit what was supposed to become. It wasn't that Yosef created the outcome. Yosef deciphered the dream based on what God put in his mind, based on what God knew he was going to do in the outcome. That's the way Yosef interpreted. In other words, go back to that piece of Gemara we said, that the dream goes according to the interpretation. If Yosef had any input here, Yosef could have deciphered the dream totally differently. How could Yosef decipher them? Says the Taz, here in text 4b. Yosef did not interpret the dreams according to his human understanding, by focusing on what the details in the dream represented. Rather, the dreams reflected interpretations different from what Yosef would have given using basic human understanding. What do we mean? Using human dream interpretation capability, Yosef would have interpreted the baker's dream positively as well, explaining that the birds eating from the basket represent Pharaoh eating the baker's bread once more. Similarly, he would have interpreted that Pharaoh would once more eat from the basket upon the baker's head. He would have said that that bird eating from the basket is a representation of Pharaoh eating from the basket. For it was common to carry baskets on the head. So why did Yosef give such a dire interpretation? If he was looking to be a psychoanalyst and make the baker and the butler feel better about themselves and be able to be positive, he would have put a positive twist even on the dream of the baker, the same way he did it for the butler, for the Sarah Mashkim. Could have done it for the baker. There's ways to give. If you wouldn't know the narrative and what happened afterwards, you could make a beautiful, beautiful ending to the story of the baker. That he's also going to come back and be part of Pharaoh's staff, and it's going to be good. It's going to be just like it was. Why didn't Yosef say that? So concludes the Taz, certainly it is because the divine spirit was within him. And he knew what was truly decreed for them. So he was not, again, important here to realize that here when we're talking about a godly interpretation by a divinely inspired man like Yosef, the interpretation was not hinged, the outcome was not hinged on his interpretation. The interpretation was based on what God's outcome would be. Based on that outcome, Hashem placed into Yosef's mind the interpretation, so he would interpret it based on the reality that would come to be, and indeed that came to be. And therefore, as we know, the butler, Sarah Mashkim, the cupbearer, should have really taken Yosef very seriously and tried to do something for him in thanks with Pharaoh, which he didn't, which is a topic of a different discussion, why for 2 years Yosef languished in prison after having done a tremendous favor for the butler. The basic lesson from that would be, do somebody a favor, unfortunately, they forget about you when they don't need you. The answer and the lesson for us would be, make sure not to be like that. But there's a deeper meaning that Rashi tells us, that is, that Yosef should not have put his trust on human flesh and blood when he told the butler, remember me to Paro, take me out of here. Those 2 words, remember me and take me out of here. For that, he got 2 more years of prison. Hashem said, who are you relying on? Why? It's a different discussion about, wouldn't we expect him to try and get himself out? Doesn't Hashem tell us that I help those who try and help themselves? The simple answer is Yosef was on such a high level of faith and trust. Hashem expected him just to trust in Hashem. Or another answer, which perhaps is more relevant to us, is that Yosef had seen he's on a roller coaster that's out of his control totally. He goes to, his father says to go check up on his brothers, and all of a sudden they sell him, and all of a sudden lands up in Egypt, and all of a sudden he sees whatever he does is successful, and then the wife of Potiphar tries to seduce him, and then he gets thrown again into jail, and now he has this dream, and he's able to give an interpretation. He should just see Yosef. He should tell himself, it's not in my hands. God is driving. When God is driving, I'm just going to go along for the ride. But he tried to grab the steering wheel here. He tried to say, you know what, maybe there's an angle for me to get out. And in that scenario, grabbing the steering wheel was not the right thing. Usually it is. Usually Hashem wants us to steer. And then Hashem grabs the steering wheel and he pulls. We try pulling this way, and it goes that way. It's because Hashem is taking it that way. But he wants us to try and do what we think is good for us. We think turning right is good, but he knows that left is much better. So, as you know, like those kids when they're on the you have those go-karts, those little trains that go on the tracks, but they have steering wheels. The kids are going. It's just going on the tracks. The kids think they're steering. The 3-year-old kid thinks he's steering. That's going on the tracks. That's the same thing with us. God wants us to steer. He steers whatever way he wants and going on his tracks. But there are certain select times where Hashem is obviously steering. And then all he wants us, maybe not to take our hands off the steering wheel, but just to have them loosely on the steering wheel and just just go with the flow. Just, it moves that way, make yourself that way. That's what Hashem was doing here with Yosef, and he should have sensed that, and everything's out of his control. Just keep doing what you're doing. But saying, maybe you can get me out of here, that was putting his own input in a place where it didn't really belong. So that's parenthetical. But Yosef's dream did come fulfilled. Yosef's interpretation was fulfilled because that was the reality that Hashem wanted to do. And there's a famous parable of a person who walked by an archery. And he sees that the darts, somebody had thrown darts, and all the darts were perfectly targeted. 5 different, what it's called, an archer ring or targets drawn on the wall, and each one had a dart. Just a minute, he says, wow, this guy must be a sharpshooter. He asked the guy, how did you get a bullseye every time? He says, first I threw the dart, and then I drew the target around it. And that's Hashem. Here the dream wasn't, there's a dream and how will I interpret it? Will I get the interpretation right? Here what Hashem did here is He created the reality He wanted to do. And the dream was drawn around the reality. Hashem formed a dream to come to the baker and the butler that would reflect the reality that He was going to do. And Yosef read into that reality, and that's why he interpreted that way. Yet, we can also see some things in the dream which perhaps were markers or we could learn from to tell us what is a positive behavior and what is a behavior that's, God forbid, a failure behavior. Because we had a successful person here, the butler, both in jail, both are dealt situations in which they seem to be hopeless. And one has a dream, and that dream talks about a rejuvenation and a comeback and a reinstatement to his prior position. The other dream just speaks about a total cessation, just about a total dismal failure, death, destruction. What's the difference between the two dreams? Let's see that there's actually some difference in the perspective and the attitude also of the people involved. So one thing we can point out is that the conduct of the baker and the conduct of the cupbearer, of the butler, what's the difference in their conduct? Let's understand this. They both came before Yosef. Yosef came to them and was taking care of them. He says, you guys really look upset today. What's the matter? And they said, we each had a dream. So Yosef says, well, God has the answers. Would you like to share it? What does the butler say? The cupbearer, what does he say? Right away he says, oh, you think you have a godly reading into this? Here's my dream. What did the baker do? The baker hesitated. He waited to see what the interpretation would be for the butler. When he heard a nice interpretation, he says, oh, you know what? I'll tell you my dream as well. He didn't believe so much. He heard God has answers. That didn't buy him. He needed to. There's a saying, they say that some people don't believe until they don't count the money. They don't believe. When they can count it, then they believe. This guy Yosef told him God has answers. The butler believed. He says, okay, let me hear what God has to say. The baker, he wasn't buying into it. Once he saw that Yosef had given a nice interpretation to the dream of the Sarah Mashki, he said, oh, I also had a dream, and this was the dream. So that's already a fallacy, which we point out here. That's a problem. But let's look at something else here. Let's look at something else. And that is that we actually learn, interestingly, we learn in the Gemara, the Yerushalmi Gemara, we quote it in text 6, we learn that what is the source for the 4 cups of wine that we drink for Pesach? One of the reasons we drink 4 cups of wine, Rabbi Yehoshua ben Levi said, they correspond to the 4 cups of Paro. In other words, the 4 times Paro's cup is mentioned in the cupbearer's dream. It says 4 times the word cup. That 4 times cup, later on the rabbi said, we're going to have a grand feast. And the Torah says we should have a Seder and eat matzah. And the rabbis instituted to have a very regal, freedom kind of event. and there should be 4 cups of wine. Why 4? There are various reasons, but one of the reasons for the 4 is because we have 4 cups of wine hinted at in the dream of the butler. 4 cups of wine of Paro, which represents the 4 cups of wine that we drink on Pesach. But now let's understand something. What's so special about those 4 cups? We have 3 baskets with the baker as well. Why don't we do anything for those 3 baskets? Why don't, let's say, we eat 3 cheesecakes on Shavuos? 3 kinds of cheesecake because we have 3 baskets on the... But apparently the cups of wine we talk about with the butler, they are exciting for us. They are meaningful to us. The 3 baskets of bread are quite the opposite. They're quite dismal to us. We wouldn't want to remember ourselves about them. But why? What's the difference? So here we have a nice, beautiful parable by the Dubna Magi, text number 7a, who gives a nice parable to explain how Yosef knew to interpret the cupbearer's dream for the good and the baker's dream for the bad, even though the 2 dreams seem to contain a similar message. And here's the difference. The parable goes like this. There was once a painting of a man with a basket of bread on his head. A live bird swooped down to the picture and began to peck at the bread in the basket. 2 men passing by stopped to marvel at the sight. Wow, the bird really thinks there's bread there. The first man said, the painter is so talented. His painting looks so real that the bird thinks the bread is real. Amazing. 3D, like he really thinks it's real. His friend replied, he's not so talented. For he only managed to make the bread look real, but not the person. If the person would look real, the bird would be afraid to approach him. Right? It was like a scarecrow. The scarecrow looks real, the birds don't come to the field. In the painting, obviously the person didn't look very real. The bread looked real, so the birds came. So too here, what is the dream? The dream is that the bird swoops down, and the birds are eating the bread from the top of the head of Yosef, of the baker. So Yosef realized that he was standing before him was essentially a dead person, a shadow. This is a person who obviously the dream is saying that the birds won't be scared of him. Birds are not scared of a dead person. The hyenas come right away, the jackals, the hawks, they pick at there's no fear of a dead person. A live person is a different reality. The creatures stay away. So for the fact that they were eating from the basket on his head, he understood that this was a person that wasn't going to live. And therefore he said to him, in 3 days Paro will remove your head from you. That's what he saw. Now let's compare this with the butler, the cupbearer. What do we see with the Sarah Mashkim, the cupbearer? We see a different reality. Is he just passive or active? Let's go back to the dream. What was in the dream? Go back to text 1, page 185. You see the details of the dream. Look up page 186, to the second last paragraph. He says, Paro's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and squeezed them into Paro's cup, and I placed the cup on Paro's palm. So he squeezes and places. That's action. So we say like this. In the dream of the butler, the dream of the Sarah Mashkim, he was actively doing something. He was moving like a live person. As it says in the pasuk we just said, Paro's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes. He's holding the cup, first of all. I squeeze the grapes, and then I present the cup to Paro. Yosef knew this man was destined to live. This man's active. And this was the way he interpreted his dream. Hashem had given the interpretation to his mind, but this is if we look at it, after we know Hashem's interpretation, we can see where the dream's different. The baker did nothing in his dream. What did he say? Let's go back. Let's go back to the dream of the baker. The dream of the baker, page 187. It says like this. The chief baker saw it and interpreted well. He says, me too. In my dream, behold, there were 3 wicker baskets on my head. Okay. Fine. But now let's see what happens. In the topmost basket were all kinds of Pharaoh's food, the work of a baker. It didn't say about him baking. It says there were bakery items on my head. And the birds were eating them from the basket top of my head. It doesn't say he gave it to the bird. Again, he's passive. He doesn't bake it, just bakery goods appear. He doesn't present it. The bird's eating from his head. Yosef understood from this that this man was destined to die. This man was not participatory in any of the process of presenting to Paro. So we've spelled out here in chart 1 that on the one hand he said, the baker says, me too, in my dream. In other words, he wasn't comfortable to say his dream, he wasn't comfortable to believe. And God till the butler had a favorable interpretation. Then we have there were 3 wicker baskets on my head, and we have, behold, a vine is before me, a vine which is something that grows. Then we have the work of a baker. Compare that with the butler who has a cup of Paro in his hand, and he takes the grapes, squeezes them. And then again, grand finale, where the baker says, it's on my head. The butler says, I presented, not just on my head and the bird comes to eat, but I presented the cup, put it on Paro's palm, put it on Paro's. So what does this tell us? As we know, again, Hashem gives him the answer and he goes according to the interpretation of Hashem, but there are some indicators here about, once we know the outcome, we can see some indicators about what is a good dream, what is a bad dream. And this can be very helpful to tell us how we should model and fashion our own behavior. In other words, let's imagine, I'll tell you a beautiful story. Somebody once came to the Rebbe and he said about all that Sodus is going through, all the trouble. And he said, Oi, Rebbe, he says, was wird sein? What's going to be? The Rebbe told him, Yidden don't say, was wird sein. Hashem decided, the Jew should say, was kann man tun? What shall I do? Was soll ich tun? What shall I do about it? The situation is so dismal. What shall I do? Not what's going to be. What's going to be is passive. It's going to be, what can I do? What should I do? What can I do? That's action. So here we see hinted at that there's different approaches. The Sarah Mashkim comes, he's full of belief, he wants to hear the answer. His dream itself is full of action. Yes, he knows, he's thinking about, subconsciously, he's thinking in his dream how he can get back to Paro's graces and how he can work and possibly present to Paro. The baker is just going with the flow. He's a victim. What shall I do? What's going to be? The butler is asking, what should I do? And he goes and does it. So now, in their case, the dream really was a reality that Hashem, for whatever reason, had set out for them. But what we can learn from this is that when we face scenarios, we have to try and do more like, we have to be like the Sar HaMashkim, like the butler, and take a proactive approach in helping ourselves to rectify the situation. Now we have many teachings of Hasidus that help us understand this. First of all, the Lubavitcher Rebbe teaches in the Hayom Yom, dated 22 tables, sighing alone will not bring us salvation. You know what sighing is? Oy vey, kvetch. Sighing alone will not bring us salvation. Sighing is only a doorknob that unlocks the heart and opens the eyes so that one will not sit idly with folded arms. A sigh is, oy vey, the way things are going is not good. But instead, once you realize that things are not good, one should plan one's efforts and take action. Every individual according to his abilities. What should he be trying to do? Towards the goal of strengthening and disseminating the study of Torah and the observance of his mitzvahs. One person through writing, another one through public speaking, and another with his financial resource. In other words, and as he continues in text 9, my revered father, this is in another quote in Hayom Yom, 8th of the 2nd of Adar 2, my revered father, the Rebbe Rashab, writes in one of his letters, one action is better than 1,000 sighs. Our God is alive and the Torah and its mitzvahs are eternal. Abandon sighing. Apply yourself diligently to actual avoda, to working, and God will be gracious to you. In other words, the approach of bemoaning the state that you're in, that's a defeatist approach. To recognize the negativity or the difficulty which you're in is important, but only because that will help you chart a course of action. So that, there's the victim mentality you sometimes have. Somebody will complain, oh, he thinks it's so tough, and you try and give him an idea. You know what they do? You give him an idea? Oh no, that won't work. No, it's just that the government, they're all against me. They have this. Hello. We once had somebody who was in jail for nothing major, but he had this whole scenario in his mind that the American government was out to get him. There's how many people in America? He hadn't done anything really very terrible. You think there's really a conspiracy out there to get you just about. But it crippled him and handicapped him. He wasn't able to decide what to do to get himself out of that situation. Thank God Hashem enabled through some nice people, we were able to bring a nice ending to that. But that's not the point. The point is when somebody sees himself in a victim situation, when he sees himself as being powerless to do anything, when he loses his determination or his interest to do something to help himself, that's in itself a sign and a precursor that he will not be successful. The attitude has to be one not of sighing, not of moaning, not of oiving, not of kvetching, but what can I do to try and rectify the situation? Yes, we say, oh, it's so bad today. There's so much immorality. There's so much challenge to keeping a life, a moral life, a Jewish life, a properly observant life. It's so difficult. Okay, good, granted, it's so difficult. But what are you going to do about it? Add some light. Do one thing. Start with something. The problem with the youth, you worry about the youth, so go out and reach out to a young person and try and inspire them. Don't just sit and kvetch. Kvetching is for losers, and it leads to losing. Action, positivity, trying to do what you can. That's what our job is. And we see that in the dreams so clearly. There's a story we quote. You have a chassid whose name was Rabbi Yecheskel Fagin. They used to call him Chatsha. Chatsha Fagin, that was his nickname. And he once had a fabrengen. He had a Hasidic gathering with a group of yeshiva baruchim in Russia during the dark communist era, talking in the 1920s. Needless to say, such a gathering was illegal. We weren't allowed to have such a gathering. So there were two boys that were put upstairs to be on the lookout to see if the people are coming, if the police are coming. Without any thought of the danger involved, Reb Chatsha spoke from his heart. He made demands of himself and of the young men who were speaking. They have to become more sincere, they have to become more observant, they have to study better. And people took him seriously, and some of them were moved to tears. They started crying. Thought about how they really are not as good as they could be. Suddenly, one of the young watchmen from above came running down and said, "The police are on the way. It looks like there's KGB coming in, and KVD, as they called them then." So immediately, the atmosphere changed. The yeshiva baruchim quickly had some plans. Some said we should run away. Some said no, that's going to make it more suspicious. Some say maybe some will be caught. Maybe let's take out magazines. But everybody did something. They spread, like in the old days in the Greeks, they spread some political communist material on the table. The guys came down again and says, no, the coast is clear. The suspicious people left. I don't think it was KGB. And the fabrengen continued. But now Reb Chatsha said, did you notice what happened here? Did you see what happened here? When I was talking to you about how we have to change and how things have to become better, you guys started crying. But what happened when all of a sudden you thought the police were coming? When you thought the police were coming, you know what happened? No one cried. Nobody started crying. You all started thinking what you can do to save yourself. Why not cry? Because crying doesn't help. If the police are about to come down, you're not going to help yourself by crying. You can help yourself by trying to create, maybe running away, or maybe putting a cover-up on the table to show that you were having a deep political discussion from Mother Russia, or something like that. Crying is not an answer. And that's a very, very, very powerful story. Crying is not a replacement for action. Take away that crying. And, Hasidim would say, instead of crying so much about your sins, that time you took for crying, you could do 2 mitzvahs. So we have to be aware when there's a difficult situation, we're not ostriches. You have to be aware of it and be aware of the gravity. If somebody did something wrong, you have to be aware of it. But don't spend your energy wallowing in it and sighing and crying. That's not going to bring you a result. And here we have a letter from the Rebbe, written in 1956, which elaborates on this even more. He writes as follows, page 201. My father-in-law, the Rebbe, did not reckon with sighs. He didn't like that. That wasn't in his lexicon that people should kvetch and moan. For sighing is contrary to the path of Hasidus. The reason there's nothing in our house. Did we go offline? Because I see that the
וידאו לא עובד.
video is not working.
לא עובד.
Still on?
Yeah.
There's
זה פשוט נגמר, זה לא עבד. אפשר לעשות.
But could be it's still broadcast. No, it couldn't be broadcasting that close.
It is, just the sound.
Just the sound.
I think so, yeah.
אה,
So is it working now?
לא.
Why did it stop? There's no memory.
Probably.
Sure.
You
Now
deleted today's?
deleting, yeah, it's
You
written now.
deleted today's.
It was written now, now deleting. It was
What?
written.
אבל עשיתי פליי.
Which one did you delete?
We're not
Just a
online.
second.
מחקתי?
Huh?
לא יודע, אחד של שבוע שעבר, אני
לא
ראיתי.
בטוח? Okay.
עכשיו לא צילמתי את
We're
החלק.
still on? Now we're live?
כן, שנייה.
Okay. No, don't do anything. We're live again.
לא לחזור וידאו, הוידאו לא עובד.
Let's play.
הוא עובד.
Set,
לעשות
set
זה לזה?
built-in
כי
memory
זה
full.
סטופ עדיין, זה סטופ לזה. זה עדיין
Are we
סטופ.
still broadcasting?
It's set,
Okay.
no, but it's set built on.
We're still broadcasting. As
אבל
long
זה לא עובד, זה לא על. זה לא
Turn it
על.
on.
Yeah, it's still broken. I can hear you that you say it's still broken.
Okay, for all those who are still with us.
Now live. Okay. We're back.
So let's go back to the parable. We say that there's nothing in this world that's for nothing. So in other words, going back to the parable I said that I just read that the Rebbe wrote, an interesting parable. A woman who's running a tight ship and everything is set up just tip-top. So there's absolutely nothing, here I'd like to give thanks on my son Ephraim, who's our technician. He does a great job. But even he knows that everything is by divine providence. And if it goes offline in the middle, that's because Hashem wanted it to go offline. You can try as hard as you want. When Hashem wants us to be online, we'll be online. When he wants us to be offline, we'll be offline. At any rate, so everything's from Hashem. So anything in the house, if you go into a good, well-run home, if there's something in the house, you know it's there for a reason. Right? If Hashem's running his house, you can be sure. There is nothing that is created for nothing. The most horrible thing you can hear a person say, a kid says, I was born by mistake. What do you mean there's no such thing as mistake? Can you imagine a kid walking around his whole life, his parents told him you were a mistake, it didn't mean you, God forbid. God, what the parents meant or didn't mean, that's up to them. But God means every single atom that exists in the universe is by divine plan. God wants it in the world. How much more so a human being? If you're here as a cognizant human being, there is no question God has a plan for you and He needs you in this world. There's no replacement for you. If there was a replacement, He wouldn't have created you. The same thing goes with time. He did not create any extra time for any person. There is no such thing as extra time to waste. Now we continue with the quote of the Rebbe's letter. Every day and every second must be used properly. As my father-in-law, the Rebbe, said, in the name of the Tzemach Tzedek, we are day workers. In other words, our job is to make the world more day, to brighten the world. So we have full-time work. There's no time off. If there's an extra minute, God wouldn't have given it to us. Every minute is there to be utilized in doing our mission. Now our mission, just remember, our mission is not necessarily from work. We have time off because when you go to work, so let's say you're a computer programmer. So from 9 to 5 you have to program computers. After 5, you go do your own stuff. Serving Hashem is every single thing we do. He wants us. It's not like, oh, when we eat, we're not gods anymore. No. When we eat, we have to eat the way God wants us to eat. The foods God allows us to eat. When we sleep, the way God wants us to sleep. Every single thing we do in our life, there's nothing outside of the service of God. And that's why if you learn the mitzvahs, it starts from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep and how you sleep. Although you're not really aware of how you sleep. There's a bracha. You say right before you go to sleep, thanking Hashem for the greatness of sleep and the refreshment of sleep, and asking Hashem to give you, to protect you and so on. The moment you wake up, the first moment of awareness, it's Modeh, thanking Hashem. And it's from the moment of birth to the moment of passing. Every second, every minute, every moment, every nanosecond is given to us as a gift from God. Therefore, my father-in-law, continuing the quote, my father-in-law, the Rebbe said, one action is better than 1,000 sighs. Because even if you sigh 1,000 sighs, heartfelt sighs, real krechzen, like we say, real sighs that come from the heart, it would still be better to do one act of Torah and mitzvahs and forget about 1,000 sighs. For the purpose is not to break the body through sighs. Our purpose is to serve God with the body. The way to serve God with the body is to do action, to do activities, to think good things, to speak good things, to do good things, to study Torah. As we said, a Jew's job is to brighten. First to brighten his own body and animal soul, which means his animal soul shouldn't be allowed to become materialistically indulgent. His animal soul should also be used in the right way. Yes, we eat, but eat in a kosher way, eat in a healthy way, eat in a calculated way that is for energy to do good things, and so on and so forth. And then we brighten our homes and the life of the wife and children, our families, and then, by extension, our communities and so on. Doing so will brighten his own life, and at that point, automatically, there's no reason to sigh. If you start doing what you should do, the reason for sighing will go away. So, does it mean we should be ignorant or we should ignore the reality of perhaps the difficulty or the dismalness or the bleakness and darkness of the situation we're in? No! The Baba Rebbe writes in another Hayom Yom, important path. The true path demands that one recognize his true self with a genuine acknowledgement of his shortcomings and virtues. When he is aware of his shortcomings, he should correct them with actual work and not discharge his obligation by merely sighing. See, crying is an outlet. When do we cry? We cry for two reasons. We can cry tears of joy, we can cry tears of frustration, we can cry tears of sadness, but what tears will always be is an overloading of circuits, so to speak. It's when something so good has been told to me that I'm so emotional, it'll overflow into tears. When something so painful or so terrible has been told to me, I'll be moved to tears. When I'm so frustrated, maybe tears may well up my eyes. It's important to know the situation, but feeling. You ask somebody after they cry, did you feel, a kid, you can ask them, did you feel better now? But that's a danger. If crying made you feel better, but you didn't address the underlying issue, you didn't do anything. So you felt, I feel so bad about I didn't do whatever I was supposed to do, and I cried. Yeah, go and do it. That's the way you should rectify it. So this is hinted to us in the dream of the butler and the baker. The baker is just a victim, a passive guy. Can you imagine? And there are some people that they feel that circumstances have dealt them a situation and that's it. They have no hope. We are told as Jews, we may have been dealt. It may be true that we do face circumstances that are unfavorable, that are unpleasant, that seem unfair. The reaction to that has to be, the way we have to behave is not to be defeatist. We have to try and do our best to try and do the next move that Hashem wants us to do. And ultimately, our life is always about doing the next right thing. And sometimes people go through difficult periods in history in their lives, and people go through difficult days. Sometimes really you have to know the only thing to do is to focus on the next step. Right now you have to put one foot in front of the other, just keep moving. Don't fall into an apathy, don't fall into an inactivity, into a feeling that everything is futile. What do I have to do right now? Don't worry about the big picture. What you have to do right now is the next move. You know what that is? Yes, I know what that is. Go do it. The rest will come from Hashem. Don't just sit and fetch. Don't just sit and mope. Get up and do something. That's the message we have here today. So may we all be successful in doing what we have to do, doing one more activity. And this comes especially pertinent in what we start celebrating tonight, the Yud Tes Kislev, the 19th of Kislev, the day of redemption of the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chabad Hasidism. Alter Rebbe was released from jail, and we call it the Rosh Hashanah, the new year for Hasidic learning and behavior. One of the key elements of Hasidic behavior and study is always to keep moving to do good things, not to focus on the bad, not to focus on the negativity, to focus on the good. And to have joy. And one of the most important facets of joy is that joy brings with it energy, positive energy, an energy to be motivated to do things, to move forward. And as we know, the Alter Rebbe wrote in Tanya, when two people are wrestling, if one is agile and the other is kind of sluggish, even if the sluggish guy is more strong, the more agile guy, the more energetic guy will win. Because what counts is not always just our strength, but how much enthusiasm we put into it. And so Hasidism taught from its very beginning, taught joy and enthusiasm. So much so, they used to call the Hasidim in their first name, they used to call them the Freiliche, the joyous ones. And I'll just finish with a very beautiful story about positivity and joy. Rabbi Gurevich is a shliach in Lyon, in France, and he tells the following story. Before he went to Lyon, the Rebbe said, "But you must go with joy, because the French don't like a zoyer eponim, like a sour face." Okay, he didn't know what that was saying, but a few years later he had a story which gave him new light into the Rebbe's prophetic words. He had started a school, and they had outgrown their premises, and they really needed to find a premises for a school. And they really needed to get it from the city. The city municipality should give them a building that they could use, but they couldn't get anybody to understand or to take their request seriously. Finally, they got to an official, and he said, "Yeah, you know what? I will help you." And he said, "Okay." And he gave them a building, and he helped them a lot. And later, he explained to me, he says, "You know why I helped you? I came home that night, and I said, I had a meeting with this rabbi who said he's from a group called Hasidim, and he asked me for help. You think I should help him?" And my dad said, "Let me look up what is Hasidim, what is Hasidism." His father, not being Jewish, but he looked up in an encyclopedia, and he saw that Hasidim place a great emphasis on joy. They're Jews, but one of the great emphases they have in their service of God is joy and enthusiasm and optimism. And he told his son, "Look, I have a number of Jewish friends, very successful, but the one thing I really have trouble with is whenever I ask them how life is, they're always kvetching. These people are successful people, wealthy people, successful in their fields. I don't like the fact that they're always kvetching, they're always sighing, they're always saying, oy, 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 this or that." And when he read that the Hasidim are joyous people, he told his son, if that's the kind of Jews they are, check it out, if that's what they look like, and they're still part of that tradition, I think we've got to go help them. We need more people like that. And that's why he helped. And so Rabbi Gurevich understood how years earlier the Rebbe had told him, remember, you have to go with joy, because with French, don't like sourpuss people, they like joyous people. The Rebbe was already alluding to the blessing that he would have through blessing and joy. And this is something, even if you're not dressed like a chassid, the Alter Rebbe wanted Hasidism, the way of life, the beliefs, the philosophies, the activities of Hasidism are there for everybody. It's not for a select group or anything like that. So if there's one thing I would urge you in honor of this day of Yukas Kislev, take upon yourself, be more positive, go leave the oy vey, and what should you say instead of oy vey? Instead you should say oh yay! Yay!
Oh, yeah.
So leave the oy vey, say oh yay! You should all have a very good year in the study of Chassidus and the behavior of Chassidus. You should have a great Chanukah, which is coming up next Matzah Shabbos. It should be a festival of light, a festival of miracles for us all. Mashiach should come to give us the final, most beautiful miracle to take us out of this exile. Thank you very much. And we have to turn this off, as we now know.
If you can use the switch off button. There is a switch off button here. Shall we?
It's starting automatically.
70